All right, all right, all right. Welcome everyone to the First and 60 show. I am Sunny Cadwallader, also known as Cad Chica on Twitter, based here in the Pacific Northwest, and I'm joined by my co-host. Hey, Russ, how you doing?
Hello, Sunny. How are you doing today? Popular demand, and as we saw, well, despite that, we came back anyway. So, you can follow me, obviously, on Twitter at Bax Football Guru. I follow Sunny at Cad Chica on Twitter. And very interesting day in the NFL. As we all know, free agency's kind of dying a little bit. All the big names for the most part have been scooped up, but we saw Mark Sanchez officially signed with the Eagles today. No Sean Moreno, not Dan Marino, went to the Dolphins. And Sean Phillips, later this afternoon, Sean Phillips, the defensive end outside linebacker from the Broncos, joined the Tennessee Titans.
And there's nothing else going on really today. Was there, Russ? I mean, maybe you might know somebody who might know something else that went on today?
Let me see. Johnny Rockets?
Johnny Quest?
Johnny
Dawkins?
Johnny Mathis? My father's favorite singer.
There's a good one.
There you go.
Why don't you introduce who just joined our show, Russ?
Well, I'd be proud to. Steph Stradley does a great job covering the Houston Texans for the Houston Chronicle. I've had the opportunity to speak with her before on the air, and lucky enough I get to speak to her again. How are you, Stephanie?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm going to cut right to the chase when it comes to the Houston Texans. As we all know, they have the #1 pick in the draft. It's actually the third time in their history that this will occur. Obviously, when they were an expansion team in 2002, when they took David Carr, 2006, when they took Mario Williams. But I'm going to skip that part for 1 second, Steph, and ask you about Matt Schaub, obviously now dealt to the Oakland Raiders for a 6th-round draft choice. In your words, you cover the team. You know the team pretty well. What went wrong for Matt Schaub with the Houston Texans?
I think a lot of things went wrong for Matt Schaub. I think that fundamentally, he had his injury in 2011, and he never seemed the same after that. In addition, the whole right side of the line, took a beating after that 2011 season as well. So he was coming back 2012. The defense was so good that year that early in the year they had so many early leads. He really didn't have to do that much. His numbers weren't that spectacular because they could just run the ball with these early leads. But then later in the season, the right side of the line really got exposed, and the thought was, well, maybe with a full camp after 2012, he'll kind of bounce back. And that just didn't happen. It probably also didn't help that early in 2013, they pretty much had a coach-killing kind of schedule. They faced a whole bunch of playoff teams early in the season and just kind of got completely derailed. And I'm sure mentally Matt Schaub wasn't quite right, and then physically he wasn't quite right, and then it also didn't help that their head coach missed a portion of the season with his mini stroke. So, I mean, everything that could possibly go wrong in the 2013 Texans season did go wrong.
Yeah, almost a little mystifying. You go back to 2012, as you well know, this was an 11-1 football team, and you go into Foxborough on a Monday night, and that's when you kind of notice something with Matt Schaub. He looked like a quarterback who, for lack of a better word, Stephanie, seemingly lost his confidence. And I remember that 5-day stretch, as you well know, when they beat the Jacksonville Jaguars in overtime, and then on Thanksgiving they beat the Detroit Lions in overtime. And then they came back for that showdown on Monday night, and he, more than anyone else, just didn't seem the same. I noticed even in the way he was throwing the ball, Stephanie, he was almost aiming the football rather than throwing it.
I don't think he was quite right after that Detroit game. It was a bunch of games all in a row. If you looked at the injury list after the Detroit game, I can't remember a Texans injury list as long as it was. And quite frankly, I don't know if he lost his arm strength then or just his confidence in the line. He was getting hit a whole bunch early in the year, and the Texans kept on saying, oh, well, we need to be better than that. And I think in some ways they put a little bit of training wheels on the offense. They had injuries at the tight end. The tight end was something that Matt Schaub very much relied on. And I just don't think I don't think that I think their offense got old and young and didn't have enough key players in the middle. And when you're old and young, you can't run the entire playbook. They didn't trust their wide receivers, and they didn't trust their line.
That's a great point. It just shows you how fragile a talented team can be. We saw it with the Kansas City Chiefs. You know, team loaded with Pro Bowlers going 2-14, then bounce back. I mean, the good news for the Texans, as we know, is 2 years in a row now we've seen a 2-14 team rebound to go 11-5. The Colts did it 1 year, and of course Kansas City did it last year. So I guess we should just automatically pencil in the Texans at 11-5. Obviously, easier said than done.
Yes.
What's the thing you're most excited about in terms of the Texans so far this offseason?
Well, you know, they can't really make a lot of moves this year because, you know, unlike a lot of teams that are coming off of such bad seasons, they don't have a lot of cap space. So really they're trying to just minimize the problems that they already have. And, you know, it's really hard to make too many key predictions about the Texans because we don't even know what their quarterback is. They have a first-time head coach. They, you know, even though they have an experienced defensive coordinator, he's switching to a different type of 3-4 with really not much of the personnel that he's accustomed, you know, Romeo Crennel is accustomed to for his 3-4. Like they don't have a starting defensive tackle. You kind of would like that for a Romeo Crennel 3-4. So it's hard at this point in the offseason to make any predictions given you don't really know what their quarterback situation is going to be.
Oh,
or
no
how
doubt.
their offense is going to be.
Yeah, I was just more so if there was something that you saw that you found it a very intriguing move. And to be honest, the Texans haven't made a lot of moves
this
season. Yes, exactly. They're kind of strapped. As you said, there's been some minor moves, and the minor moves have been kind of defensive moves, guys who Romeo Crennel knew from the Kansas City Chiefs. So, you know, that's what we've seen. They've been very, very quiet, and meanwhile, they obviously have lost some talent as well. Well, I mean, let's get into the million-dollar question, although I know it'll cost a little more than that. What direction, Stephanie, do you think, and I know it's 42 days away, that's Ronnie Lott's number, by the way, as we do my countdown. 42 days away, what direction do you think the Texans are leaning toward? Leaning. I'm not asking you to put you on the spot. Where do you think they might be leaning in terms of even position with that number one pick?
Well, you know, it's really hard to say because, you know, Rick Smith as a GM hasn't worked with anybody other than Gary Kubiak, and he tends to work very closely with his coaching staff to determine who he gets as picks. So you can't really look at the past and go, oh, well, this is the kind of direction that they're going to go.
Okay.
And, you know, Bill O'Brien as a new head coach we don't know what he's going to be. The only things that we really have heard are some of the statements that he's made in the recent owners meetings at the Owners Club breakfast. And what's interesting is he made a point of saying, yes, we're taking quarterback. We don't know which round we're taking quarterback, and said as kind of an aside that he didn't see very much separation in this quarterback class. Well, if that is your point of view, if you don't think that there's one guy that you have to have perhaps at the first pick, maybe you go for Jadeveon Clowney and go that direction, and then maybe if you fall in love with a quarterback that you can get with a lower pick, that's the direction you go. And, you know, there are teams that have been successful with that. I mean, if you don't have to spend first-round money on a quarterback, you can spend your money in other places on your team. And down the road, there's this guy named J.J. Watt who's going to demand a pretty big contract. But that's something that they're looking for the future, but they don't necessarily make that decision quite yet. But it's interesting that they haven't picked up that fifth-year option yet, and maybe they're trying to work out something that's longer term than that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be. It's not going to be J.J. Watt. It's going to be J.J. How much?
Yes.
And you know, the thing. Obviously, you made a great point about them going for the quarterback later. Obviously, the Texans have the 33rd pick, the top pick in the second round. And who's to say one of those quarterbacks or another quarterback they prefer? And again, you're absolutely right. You never force the issue. If there's not somebody you're in love with, it's like buying a house. Okay, if you like it, you don't necessarily want to buy it. You love it, you want to buy it, and if they got to be able to pick a guy who they absolutely fall in love with.
Well, and that's the hardest thing for any of us as outsiders to know, is that quarterback is such a specific thing, and a lot of the things that you really want to know about a quarterback are things that us as outsiders can't know because we're not talking to them. We don't know what kind of quarterback they are, but really on the NFL level, a lot of it is what's above the shoulders, and that's something that we as outsiders have a really hard time evaluating in terms of what Bill O'Brien would want to be wed to, because this is one of those decisions that can make and break a career.
Russ, if I could ask her a quick question. Hi, Steph. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Has that been part of one of the toughest things about this offseason, is trying to get to know this new coaching staff, how Bill O'Brien thinks? I mean, it's not like he was at Penn State for a decade, so you don't have a lot to work with there as far as which direction he would go. Has that been a hard thing to gauge for you guys this offseason?
Yeah, and I think that typically ever since Charlie Casserly has left, the Texans have typically kept a lot of things in-house, especially so for the draft. But we don't even know what their scheme's going to look like. I think there's been some discussions of Houston being the Patriots South, but that's easier said than done when you don't have your Tom Brady in place.
Right.
And it's unfair to paint all of the Bill Belichick protégés as, okay, they've all been failures and da-da-da-da-da, because he is his own person. He has had a different background than some of those people, but eventually he's going to have to make his own way, and there's all sorts of people who have theoretically wanted to put in a particular scheme, but doing it in reality is a lot more difficult. And I mean, it can go very well or it can go very poorly, and you really can't get a gauge of that. I mean, we won't know anything about the Houston Texans until they play real games.
Right. Go ahead, Russ.
What about the rest of the division? If you have any thoughts on the Colts and the Titans and obviously the Jaguars. Their free agent moves, their acquisitions. The AFC South, unfortunately, last year had fewer combined wins than any division in football. And by the way, just pointing out the facts, it's 3 years in a row now there's been a 2-14 team in the division.
Yeah.
So what do you envision, no pun intended, about the competition for the Texans in the AFC South this year?
Well, I mean, I definitely think that if you were looking at any of the plus factors for the Texans in the upcoming year, it's that they are in a wide-open AFC South, that it's basically Andrew Luck's team and these whatever they're going to be teams, because we don't really have a great sense of them either.
Right.
But, I mean, it's historically a weak division, and if you look just kind of on projections of strength of schedule, it looks like the Texans will have an easier strength of schedule because they're not facing, a number one kind of matchups like they were in the previous year. So they have that going for them, and you would think that just some of the bad luck that they were having in terms of turnovers would just happen. I mean, the amount of turnovers that they had as a team was incredible. But, I mean, I think that the AFC South is wide open. It is the Colts to win. I can't say that I'm necessarily fond of all the moves that the Colts have made, but they've had money to spend and they've spent it. But, if you were trying to come back from worst to first, you couldn't pick a better division.
Very good. Good point. Any thoughts on? Did you get a chance to attend Johnny Manziel's pro day like the rest of America did today?
I did not. I'm not sure how much actually being part of the circus is
I don't think you missed
necessary.
anything.
No, and now that he's going into the NFL, he probably should be called John Football, because they're very serious in the NFL, and he needs to be leading a team, and somebody named John should be leading that team. I don't know. Bill O'Brien has talked about what he's looking for in terms of a quarterback, and it's his criteria is smart. He has to be basically, the coach on the field, because he's going to demand a lot more of the quarterback than Gary Kubiak did. Gary Kubiak's philosophy was more, hey, I'm going to take the burdens off the quarterback for thinking so that he can just do. That's not going to be the case for O'Brien. He's going to demand a ton of checks at the line for his quarterback. So he needs, first of all, a bright quarterback. And then another criteria that he has specifically mentioned is accuracy. And then, he does a lot of, just teaching up footwork and things like that. So the question is, which one of these guys is he going to want to develop? And I think, the Fitzpatrick move as a veteran is kind of a way to get that bridge so that he has some wiggle room, that if the new guy can't compete right away, he has somebody just to be able to call the signals.
This will be the last question for you, Stephanie. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I love it. And by the way,
thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. And I told Sunny the other day, the irony that our very first guest, because we did the show 2 weeks ago, Sunny took all of my airtime, and I didn't really get to talk.
Oh, yeah.
But you are our very first guest, and ironically enough, you're talking about the #1 pick on 1st and 60. So you know me, I like my numbers, I like my symmetry. It all works out well. One more question about quarterbacks, and I'll ask you about the guys who are there. Case Keenum and TJ Yates, where do you think their futures lie if the Texans do take a quarterback? I'm not sure they're going to have 4 quarterbacks on the roster. Do you have any thoughts about the other 2 guys there who have obviously started games for the franchise?
Yeah, I mean, O'Brien has said specifically to both of them that they're going to be carried on the roster and they're going to compete in training camp, and they have 90-some-odd people to look at. Mm-hmm. But eventually it's going to just be how they compete, how they pick up the offense. And, it's hard to think that they would, it's hard to make any kind of assessments at this point, because I don't think that either one of those quarterbacks are going to be the future of the franchise.
So you can't make a case for TJ, and you can't make a case for Case.
Not really.
Okay. I see Sunny just shaking her head at me there. So.
Thank you, Stephanie, for joining us. Follow Stephanie on. Why don't you let everybody know where they can connect with you, either on Twitter or at the Houston Chronicle?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Steph with a PH, Stradley, Stradley, and you can find me at the Houston Chronicle at the Ultimate Texans portion of the website. There's a link on my Twitter account where you can go straight to my content.
Excellent.
Thank you very much. It's great to see you again. I can
Always
say that, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come on 1st and 60 and talk Texans football with us.
Not a problem.
You can. There we go. All right. Well, Russ, we got a lot of information out of Stephanie tonight.
Absolutely. One guest down, 1,800 to go. We're doing good. So
pace ourselves. Let's pace ourselves. So what are some of the takeaways that you got from what Stephanie had to say, whether it's the first pick in the draft, or which direction they might be going? Maybe you've heard something that Stephanie hasn't.
Well, she brought up a great point about the Texans not being able to bring in free agents. They've got extensions, obviously, they want to take care of, and obviously J.J. Watt, as soon as you say that name, I think we know what he means to that franchise. That's why I think drafting Clowney, if that's the direction they go in, that'd be quite the pair of bookends for a team. And like Stephanie suggested, maybe you go later and get the quarterback. I always like to tell the story of, because it's almost like another number thing. In 2001, there were only 31 teams in the league, so there were 31 first-round picks. And a year later, the Texans joined the league in 2002, so we had 32 first-round picks. So it's almost like kind of an oddity, and I bring that up because in 2001, the first overall pick was Michael Vick, as we all know, by the Atlanta Falcons.
Right.
The 32nd pick, which was not a first-round pick, but it would have been the following year, Sunny, was the top pick in the second round. And that was the San Diego Chargers taking some quarterback named Drew Brees. So for the sake of 1 year where he would have been the last pick in the first round, obviously he's had a pretty magnificent career. You know, good days with the Chargers, great days with the New Orleans Saints, a
Right.
Super Bowl champion, all that. But isn't it just funny the way the numbers work sometimes? So if you're the Houston Texans and maybe you aren't in love with the quarterback, maybe you fall in love with the quarterback or flirt with him at the very least at number 33 with the top pick in the second round.
Well, let me do a quick screen share and bring in something that I saw today. Brent Zorneman, who covered Manziel at A&M, he was one of the media hordes that was there at Johnny Football's pro day. Manziel
By the way, I like Stephanie's suggestion, John Football.
John
like
Football. That's the first time I've ever actually used Johnny Football. I refuse to do it on Twitter, and why I just said that, I don't know. So shame on me. But anyway,
well, for elder citizens like me, when you think of the word Johnny and you think of the National Football League, there's probably only one name that comes to mind, and that's of course Johnny Unitas.
There you go. I think it's going to be tempting for the Titans. I meant to ask this of Steph, and I didn't get a chance to. I'm curious what the external pressure is for the Texans to draft him, since the proximity of A&M, and like I said, Brett Zorneman covered him at A&M. Manziel's agent was there at the pro day. When the lights come on, Johnny shows up, which makes me wonder, is that a direction that they want to go in? You know, I mean,
it's going to be a move that is going to be sliced and diced and made into julienne fries, no matter how you look at it. You know, and you got to go back to 2006, and I know you will remember this because the Texans took Mario Williams with the first overall pick. Then Reggie Bush, and there was obviously a lot of debate about should they take Bush or should they take Mario Williams, but there was also another debate going on, and that should the Texans take another local star in Vince Young, and of course they did not. The Tennessee Titans did with the third overall pick. So it's so funny. There's almost like this air of history repeating itself with the Texans having the number one pick. Right now, it's safe to say that it's a debate whether they want to take a quarterback or a defensive end.
Right.
And the ironic part of it is when they had the first pick in 2002, Sonny, they took a quarterback. And when they had the first pick in 2006, they took a defensive end. Now they've got one from column A and they've got one from column B.
Well, and even if they do go with the quarterback, the question is which one?
Right.
You know, Blake Bortles had just as good of a pro day. I mean, in some respects, just as strong as Manziel apparently did today. So it's like, if they do go quarterback, which way are they going to go? And that's a debate that is going to rage on for how much longer? 42 days? Is that what you said?
42 days until and May 8th is the opening night of the draft. Ronnie Lott, I'll say it again. Charlie Taylor, by the way, too, Washington Redskins Hall of Famer. But also something to keep in mind here, what Stephanie brought up, was the signing of Ryan Fitzpatrick and bringing a veteran who has played for numerous teams in this league. He's had his good moments, he's had his bad moments, but he's a guy who understands the game and he can bridge a little bit of a gap depending on whoever the rookie's quarterback, if that is the plan. I mean, you never know.
Right.
There's never listen, Peyton Manning was a starter from day one.
Right.
Okay? Carson Palmer sat out an entire rookie year and then was the starter year two. You know, Carson obviously has not had the career that Peyton has, but he's also had a successful career. I mean, injuries have taken its toll on him, but there's no rhyme or reason on how to do this, and that's what makes it all the more intriguing as to what the Texans will do, because they obviously know, seeing, and they've had to make decisions before. I mean, David Carr was their first pick in the history of the franchise. Poor guy got sacked 76 times as a rookie. That still remains an NFL record for one player.
I'm going to bring in a comment and just wanted to say, hey, everyone, to those that are watching out there, definitely leave your comments right here. If you're watching on Google Plus or on YouTube, leave your comments. We'll be happy to bring those in. If you're Following along on Twitter, please use the First and 60 hashtag. Hi, Stephanie. She just saying, hey, loving the show, getting the inside scoop so that she's ready to talk football with her dad this weekend. And yes, indeed, that is so cool. That is part of what we want to do with this show, is provide that avenue for you guys to just enjoy and talk and learn. Russ is a vast wealth of knowledge, and we're going to tap into that knowledge with something else I wanted to bring into our conversation, Russ. Something else that happened today, not too long ago, and Vince Wilfork. Vince Wilfork tweeted this out, and I don't know, I didn't check the timestamps. It was either right before or right after. Adam Schefter tweeted that he was re-signing with the Patriots, and just that it's been something that's been going on behind the scenes. He wanted to retire as a Patriot, and it looks like he's going to. Russ, your thoughts on Vince Wilfork?
Well, it's been a tumultuous week and change with the Vince Wilfork situation. They asked him obviously to restructure his contract. He wasn't in favor of that. There were reports this week that he cleaned out his locker, which I always, when I hear things like cleaning out the locker, wouldn't you clean out your locker anyway? I mean, you should keep your locker clean.
I don't know.
Okay?
I personally have never been in an NFL.
No. I mean, but listen, you've been in a locker room, working out and so on. You should keep your locker clean. So I think that was much ado about nothing. For all we know, that locker just needed a good cleaning.
It's one of those. Let's come up with some kind of a story because it's the off season. We got nothing else to talk about.
Well, here's what I will say. If you know the history of the Patriots, when it comes to this stage, when it comes to dealing with players and restructuring contracts, we have seen the lawyer Malloys released by the team. We have seen Deion Branch depart, traded. We have seen Richard Seymour let go and traded. So Vince Wilfork understands that as well as anyone, and it's just so funny how it wasn't that long ago Vince Wilfork was a first-round pick in this league, and 10 years went like that in a blink of an eye. And of course, he ended the season on IR, which was a big reason they had the defensive problems. He's one of those players who has really come into his own the second half of his career. And he's such a solid force for them. And so I can, if you feel like you're loyal to the organization and they're asking you to come, I definitely get it. And if you know the Patriots' history with this, and it's also why the Patriots are successful, because they understand that this is a turnover business. This is a young man's business. So he gets all that. But the good news is it looks like he's going to be retaining and staying in Foxborough, and that's a major plus. I think the Patriots, with their acquisitions, and if they can stay healthy this year, have this semblance of a very, very good defense.
I would agree with you. It was kind of funny to just watch all of the speculation, especially after that, after the locker cleaning incident. Oh, maybe he'll go to the Dolphins. Oh no, maybe he'll go there. Maybe he'll go there, and that's. I don't know if you want to call it fun part of the off season. All of the rumors and Twitter just exacerbates everything. But what else has been on your mind over the last few days? There's another big signing earlier this week, wasn't there, Russ?
Well, are we talking about Mark Sanchez in this instance?
I said big signing. Pump. I don't have my sound effects this time. No, it was a big signing. Somebody changing teams in the NFC.
Oh, him. Okay. So you see it because that happened actually yesterday, and that would be the one Jared Allen. And we mentioned some of the moves that happened today, and Jared Allen, the unhappiest human being in football right now has got to be Aaron Rodgers, and I'll explain in a second. Jared Allen, who about a week ago, and it's funny, in this Dewey defeats Truman world now that we get into, where we hear something and automatically it goes on Twitter and it gets out. Everybody assumed that Jared Allen was going to be a Seattle Seahawk last week after he made his second trip. Well, lo and behold, as I said,
that was based off of a Twitter report.
Exactly, and as I said, the old Bugs Bunny line, he took a wrong turn at Albuquerque and wound up with the Chicago Bears, much to the chagrin of all those NFC North quarterbacks like Matthew Stafford and Christian Ponder and Aaron Rodgers, thinking he was maybe going to be out of the division. We might have to play him once, but we certainly don't have to play him twice. And I bring up Aaron Rodgers for a reason. If you include the playoffs, Aaron Rodgers has played 11 games against the Minnesota Vikings and been sacked, and he's had success against them. He's 7-4. He's been sacked, Sonny, 38 times in those 11 games. Okay?
Wow.
But here's the key. 16.5 of the 38 sacks have come from one Jared Allen.
Wow. And we were talking about this. I'm immersed in Twitter, so I'm seeing all of the different beat writers tweeting this, tweeting that, and I was under the impression that this is going to be another old Chicago Bears defense, but you corrected me. Can you tell me a little bit more about some of what Chicago's got going on?
Yeah, they didn't bring back Mike Singletary and Richard Dent. Okay, I think we have a tendency to overreact because they brought in Jared Allen, and I don't think Jared Allen is necessarily old. The one thing I admire about Jared Allen, he never missed a game with the Vikings. So 96 games, 85.5 sacks, at least 11 sacks every one of those 6 seasons. I mean, you want to talk about, we hear the expression "guys with a motor." Okay, I mean, this guy's got. He's a drag racer, okay? I mean, he gets after it. And listen, we all have our slumps and all those different things, but still, when it was all said and done, a big part. Now, as you alluded to, Lamar Houston, 4 years in the league. Willie Young, 4 years in the league. Those are 2 of the signings that the Bears made at defensive end. They also brought back Israel Adonijah, who played for the team for a while, was with the Lions last year. So they're a little younger at defensive end than people think. They got Houston, obviously, from the Raiders. They got
Boo.
Yeah. You were doing so good.
Hey,
okay?
I did, since we did have a guest, I'm just going to throw this out there.
All
I
right.
thought I would at least dress up and look a little bit nicer than I did last week, but underneath it all, I do have my Raiders shirt.
I was very proud of you that you didn't do the face painting this week.
I have
Anyway,
never done that, but you know what? That is on my bucket list. I do want to go to a Raiders game in my lifetime, hang out with everyone in the black hole. I know I'm crazy. Call me crazy. I don't care. That's on my bucket list. Anyways,
well,
as you were saying.
it's good to bring a bucket anyway when you have that much makeup on. So
as long as I'm not hurling, right?
Well, Lamar Houston, not a tremendous pass rusher, but a steady player for the 4 years he was at the Raiders. Willie Young comes over from the Lions. They drafted defensive ends, 2 defensive ends last year. Ziggy Ansah, who had led the team with 8 sacks. Devin Taylor. So there really wasn't any room for Willie. He joins the Bears. So there's more youth on the Bears' defensive end spots that I think people realize. And let's not forget how bad the Bears were on defense last year. No team gave up more yards rushing than they did, and they were tied with Jacksonville with 31 sacks for the lowest in the league.
That should be a fun division, as always, to watch. A couple of other things that I wanted to bring up, Russ, came out of the owners' meetings earlier this week down in Florida. One of them you mentioned in an earlier tweet, 5 extra feet. I know that can sometimes be, no, I won't go there. Why don't you talk about the 5 extra feet there, Russ?
Yeah, there weren't an enormous amount of rule changes, although there was one that got people very, very upset. Now, first with the goalpost, they've been extended 5 feet. As we also know, the NFL is going to experiment with the PAT in the preseason for the first 2 weeks, where they're going to kick it from the 20-yard line, in essence making it a 37, 38-yard field goal. And I'm fine with that, because I think anytime you make rules like this, you should take advantage of the preseason and test them out, test drive them before you implement them. But the rule, obviously, that got so many people upset was no more dunking over the crossbar. And you know,
you gotta have fun. Come on, Russ, let's have fun.
You know what? If they allowed it, I was fine with it, and if they didn't allow it, I was fine with it. I just thought, listen, I do my best dunking with a donut. Okay.
I can't dunk. I'm too short, so I was okay with it. I just thought it was in what one of the first things. As soon as I saw that, I do some social media for a Hispanic Latino sports site, and I thought, you know what? They waited until Tony Gonzalez retired before they changed that rule, and that's one of the things that he said that in his later on Twitter was that they waited until he was gone, and I get why. I get because of what happened with Jimmy Graham messing up the goalpost a little bit. I get it, but come on, man, it's a fun thing to see after
listen,
the
ability
excitement.
I don't disagree with you at all. The ability to be able to do that. Now, of course, I'm older, OLD-ER.
Yes,
So
you
I
are.
remember at least the first guy I ever saw do this was Hollywood Henderson, the linebacker for the Dallas Cowboys back in
Hollywood!
1975, who had a very storied and infamous career. He went from being a star linebacker to telling Terry Bradshaw he couldn't spell the word cat without a C and an A, to being released by the Dallas Cowboys, to struggles with his personal life, and then one day I think he hit the lottery in Texas, and I think then he turned. Did he buy Hollywood after that, or?
Might have been able to, huh?
No, he's a fascinating story. But we're talking about tight ends. Jimmy Graham slam dunking. As I mentioned, Hollywood Henderson was a linebacker, and you want to talk about an athletic specimen. In this day and age where players are bigger, faster, stronger, Hollywood Henderson strikes me as a guy almost 40 years ago who'd fit in quite well today.
And also, compensatory picks were announced, and one of the things I was not fully aware of. I'm immersed in all sports, so the NFL is not always front and center on my radar. But the whole way that compensatory picks work, I know there was a lot of fans, with a lot of reporters that were having to answer fan questions. Those teams that lost some certain types of free agents this year, they didn't get compensatory picks this year. They will get them next year. Can you talk a little bit about that, Russ?
Absolutely. The compensatory system is based on the previous year's free agency activity, and it's kind of a checks and balances of how many unrestricted free agents you lost compared to how many you signed. This does not have the same effect of, for instance, we saw Julius Peppers let go by the Bears and signed with the Packers. We saw DeMarcus Ware let go by the Cowboys and signed with the Broncos. They will have nothing next year to do with compensatory picks. Those were players whose contracts were terminated. This has to do with strictly the players who were unrestricted free agents on March 11th in terms of their contract expiring. It's the NFL explains the system. There's 32 picks awarded. It enables teams to rebuild through the draft for players. It's tough in the NFL now. Teams that are fortunate enough to have depth are often penalized because they wind up signing as unrestricted free agents and getting starting jobs elsewhere. The most important thing to remember about the compensatory picks, very simply, is they cannot be traded. So when those picks are made, you'll see a team swing a deal, for an extra 3 or an extra 4, that they will never include the compensatories. It would have to be their own pick or a pick they got previously in the trade. And the one thing to keep in mind, and I didn't do this to Stephanie because putting her on the spot for this one, but the Houston Texans not only have the first pick, but they have the 256th pick. They have Mr. Irrelevant. So that's why I didn't want to do that. I was thinking, maybe in the back of my mind I'll say, Steph, forget number 1. Who do you think the Texans are going for at 256? And the Texans, as you know, would make the pick because they could not trade it.
Exactly. I wonder if Vegas has any kind of odds on who will be Mr. Irrelevant. Maybe we could get somebody from Mr. Irrelevant to come on the show and talk about the week that Mr. Irrelevant will have on the show.
Or they could invite us and we could cover it live. What do you think about that?
There we go. I like your thinking, Russ. I like your thinking.
There you go.
What have you been writing about lately for Pro Football Guru?
Well, we've had a share of guest columnists there. We're about to have one on in any minute now. But as far as me doing my usual Bleacher Report stuff, ranking free agents, just got done doing a piece who were the top 10 players signed, and the way I do it is more of a sense of it combines value with need. So I'm just not taking the 10 best players.
Were there any Raiders on that list, Russ?
Were there any Raiders on that list? No, but it's funny. When I did the top 50, I had quite a few Raiders. Now, you're laughing, but of my top 10, I thought the Raiders' pickup of James Jones from the Green Bay Packers was number 10.
Yes.
3 years, $10 million. I think now I don't know if it would have worked as well if it was Terrell Pryor with James Jones, but the fact that they got Schaub, and you have a veteran quarterback and a veteran receiver, I think they're going to lean on each other in this first year. The Raiders kind of got I don't want to say a bad rap, the whole Roger Saffold disaster, but ever since then, they've done a pretty decent job. They've rebuilt their defensive line with Lamar Woodley and Justin Tuck and Antonio Smith.
They actually look like they have a plan.
Yeah, well, listen, you bring in Reggie McKenzie. Let's not forget where Reggie comes from. He comes from the Green Bay Packers, who like to rely on the draft. He's had to do it a little differently with the free agency moves and so on. But listen, I often tweet out the teams that have the longest playoff droughts, and the Bills haven't been there since '99. The Raiders and the Browns haven't been there since 2002. In this league of parity, in the league where we're seeing all kinds of new teams, it's almost bad for the league, and I'm not blaming the franchises. I'm just saying is in this day and age when it's hard to get back to the playoffs when other teams are doing it on a consistent basis. Who knows? Maybe one year Buffalo, Cleveland, and Oakland will all make the playoffs the same year.
Really? Why not? You're lumping my Raiders with Cleveland and Buffalo?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's a drought is a drought. So,
for those of you that joined us on our first show, Russ stabbed me in the heart with a Raider slam. He just stabbed me in the heart again. I think this might be becoming a regular thing.
Well, I certainly hope that you're Catwoman because you're going to need 9 lives. So,
the claws will come out.
I guess.
What else you got, Russ?
No, well. Also coming up, or what other things I've done on Bleacher Report.
Yeah.
I did my own power rankings, and I did the power rankings in the sense of how the teams stand now. I'm not making predictions for September, and I think I mentioned, to somebody, it's been one of the most talked about pieces I've done on there. And as far as actually original Pro Football Guru original stuff. We're going to be going back to my good news, bad news series, which is kind of a review of each division, what went right for each team, what went wrong for each team, and also be bringing back on a daily basis or two times a day leading up to the draft a little thing I called if, and, or but, and it shows how every team can make the playoffs if they do this and they do this. But if they don't do this, they're not going to make it. It's a fun way to preview the season. And like I said, 42 days until the draft, Sunday, and before you know it, we're going to be analyzing the draft.
Can't get here soon enough with all of the rumors and everything else going around. We had talked about which teams have the most picks. Where I know there's a lot of I don't think they're America's team anymore, but I know there's still a significant portion of America that are interested in what's going on with the Dallas Cowboys. How many draft picks do they have? Which way do you see them going coming up in May?
Well, I think they're a team that has to rebuild their defense, last in the league. They have a new coordinator for the 4th time in 5 years. It's Rod Marinelli, who was the defensive line coach there. People remember Rod Marinelli was the head coach of the Lions when they went winless. But his reputation as a coordinator and a defensive line coach is as good as it gets. The Cowboys brought in Henry Melton, who missed a lot of time with the Bears, but he's a former Pro Bowler. They're almost kind of semi-starting from scratch on that defensive front. You know, DeMarcus Ware is no longer there. Jason Hatcher signed with the Washington Redskins. Anthony Spencer doesn't look like he's going to be back, and we only saw him for a tad last year before he got hurt. So I think it'll be defensive heavy. I believe it's in the 6th round, I think, that the Cowboys have 6 picks, a couple from trades and compensatories.
Just call it the Cowboys round.
Well, how about them Cowboys? We'll hear that more than once.
Oh, Lord help me. Who else has been intriguing you? I know there's been some off the field stuff going on down in Tampa Bay with Mike Williams. There's been talk with Deshaun Jackson, whether he's going to remain with the Eagles, possibly going to the Jets. Some fans down in Miami want them to trade for Jackson. I think they need a better quarterback first. So where do you see things going with Jackson? What have you been hearing as far as Tampa Bay and what's going on with Mike Williams, or whatever else has been piquing your interest?
Yeah, Mike Williams' situation is interesting. Obviously, there was an incident in which he was had to go to the hospital. He got stabbed in the leg by I believe it was his brother. It's accidental. But when that you know how it is. Anything that has any kind of negative connotation, and Mike Williams has had some other incidents, unfortunately, that I think that the team is kind of keeping an eye on. So. He's a very talented player, but Lovie Smith is a veteran coach, and I'm sure he would like to see his young receiver, who's still got a lot of football ahead of him, buckle down a little. Now, it's funny you brought up Deshaun Jackson because, this is a story that seemingly changes every 10 minutes. Is he on the trading block? Will he be back with Philadelphia? Now, people now debating a Deshaun Jackson, Mike Wallace trade between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Miami Dolphins. So there's a lot of there's a lot of connecting the dots that people like to try to do when they see a disgruntled player or somebody who's fallen out of favor. Even if they haven't fallen out of favor, we think they've fallen out of favor. Sometimes we connect the dots, Sonny, before the dots are ready to be connected. And sometimes these stories kind of take on a life of its own, and it's going to be very, very interesting to see what the Eagles do. I mean, they obviously have a lot of talent, but I find it hard to believe they would just give Deshaun Jackson away.
I would agree with you on that. We were supposed to have somebody else join us, but I'm not able to get a connection with him. Let me bring in one comment that I wanted to give one of our fans another shout out. Hey, Cheryl. She says she loves football, so she is listening, and she has interesting facts to surprise her son with. And he found out and is watching with me. So hi Cheryl and your son. Hi to Cheryl and there we go. Hang on just one second. See, operator error. There we go. There we go. Hi, Cheryl and your son. Thank you for joining us tonight. And be sure, if you want to know things about football, Russ is definitely the one to follow at Bax Football Guru and ProFootballGuru.com. There's been a few other things going on this week, Russ, that aren't that bring a little bit of sadness to the world of football. And specifically in Buffalo, I'm referring to the recent passing of legendary owner, AFL, NFL owner Ralph Wilson. What are your thoughts on Ralph Wilson?
Well, you think about the National Football League as it is today, and it's funny. I do a lot of historic tweeting in terms of the Super Bowl and the Super Bowl era, and it's funny. Some of the younger fans, sometimes, not all of them, well, I don't know why you send out championships before the Super Bowl. Only the Super Bowl is relevant, basically saying. And I'm like, well, no, the Packers have actually won 13 titles. Not everything starts with the Super Bowl, okay?
Hey,
yes.
Fix your camera so I can see your whole face.
There you go. You don't want to do that to America.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
There we go.
But remember, there's 48 Super Bowls, but there were 46 champions before there was a Super Bowl.
Right.
And you think about the relevance of the American Football League, the 10 years it was around, and Ralph Wilson was one of the founding fathers. They had a group of men with Lamar Hunt and just they were referred to as the foolish club, because how could this small entity come in here and challenge the National Football League? And that was before the National Football League, Sonny, was the monster that it is now. But they went out and did it. There were eventually teams from both leagues were drafting the same players, and became bidding wars. People don't realize that Joe Namath was drafted by the Jets, but he was also drafted by the St. Louis Cardinals in the NFL. Somebody like Gale Sayers, who was drafted by the Bears, but not surprisingly drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFL. You go back to the original AFL when the Kansas City Chiefs were actually the Dallas Texans. Now, of course, we have the Houston Texans, but the Dallas Texans, in the league the same year as the Dallas Cowboys, born in the NFL in 1960. But Ralph Wilson and the Buffalo Bills obviously made their mark in this league. I think sometimes unfairly. They're remembered for their Super Bowl failures and not regarded for the fact that they actually went to 4 straight Super Bowls. I don't know if we're going to see that anytime soon. We can't get it. It's been 10 years since a team's gone to back-to-back Super Bowls. But Ralph Wilson inducted in the Hall of Fame about 5 years ago by Chris Berman, actually. You think about Thurman Thomas and Jim Kelly and Bruce Smith and Marv Levy. And, of course, this summer, Andre Reed joins the Pro Football Hall of Fame. There's a degree of sadness. Our prayers go out to the Wilson family and also the Buffalo community.
Definitely.
We have an absolutely unique relationship with this team.
He had quite the impact, and we're not going to get into speculation about the team's future. That's for other shows. That's for other people to do. But he had quite the impact across the NFL. And one more story that brings a bit of a heavy heart. Jim Kelly, it was announced that he was going to forego surgery, pursue chemotherapy. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Russ, but I believe his wife had announced on their Facebook page, her Facebook page, that it was going to be chemotherapy and radiation. You've worked with Jim Kelly, you know him, and there was a lot of support on various social media outlets for Jim Kelly, for the Buffalo Bills. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about how the news affected you, your time with him, and go from there.
Well, I worked a couple of football seasons with Jim, and he had such a sense of humor, and you just always felt good when you were around him. And I've gotten a chance to see him in Canton a couple of times, run into him. Actually, I think I've run into Jim in places I wouldn't expect. Now, airport's not that unusual, but somehow you don't expect to run into Jim Kelly at a Red Sox game. I was up I've been to Fenway Park once. And that day, and I had just seen Jim in Canton about a week earlier. I was there with a friend and saw Jim. He was getting an award from the organization for his work, charity work. Not surprising. So it's funny. I took steps down to go talk to him, and the security guard looked at me and said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Yeah, I just want to say hello to Jim. I know him." And, of course, the guy looked at me like, okay, you're probably the 75th person who said that today. And no sooner did I say that Jim raised his hand and went, "Hey, bro." And that's what he liked to call people, bro. And the security guard just kind of looked at me, so I got to talk to Jim and his wife. And, it's so much fun to be around. His career, obviously, a Hall of Fame quarterback, with that amazing group of people we just talked about. Often the butt of jokes like the Bills have, but you want to talk about a competitor. I don't think we appreciate those teams. I understand their failures in the Super Bowl, but there's something very funny about the Super Bowl, and I've said this to many people. If the Bills would have been 1-3 instead of 0-4 in the Super Bowl during that stretch, they would be treated and regarded so much differently. And as it is, people, as time goes on, people appreciate what they actually did by getting there 4 years in a row. And sometimes they did it being the best team in the league, and sometimes they did it with an amazing comeback against the Houston Oilers, which Jim was not the quarterback for that game, but he later came back to the Super Bowl. They did it as the wild card team. They did it a lot of different ways. I mean, it's so odd for a team that was basically in the playoffs, Sonny, the entire decade of the 90s. They missed a couple of years. Their last playoff appearance was the Music City Miracle, which is the 1999 season. They haven't been back to the playoffs since. And Jim, it's a fun guy. He's a good person. I wish him nothing but the best. I know he'll bounce back from this. And again, prayers in order for people. Sometimes it strikes us a little more. We all know people in our lives who have been affected like this. For the people who are celebrities or athletes, it takes on a different kind of life because we all have our relationships with them, even if we don't know them. Okay, we've either cheered them, loved them, not liked them, been mad because you win your fantasy football league. The list goes on and on.
They become family in a way.
Yeah, but they do. It's exactly they do. And as we all know, you can't yell at your coworkers and you can't yell at your boss. But anytime you see your brother and sister, it's like you were both 6 years old again. Okay, give me my ball, give me my blocks. So, and Jim always made you feel like he was a member of his family and stuff. I'll never forget. In fact, the last story I'll tell you about Jim was, and legend has it, when he was inducted into the Hall of Fame, there was something like 3,000 people attended, and buses driving down from Buffalo. And I don't know if Jim footed the bill or not. I wouldn't be surprised if he did. But that was the first year that the induction was not held on the steps of Canton in Pro Football Hall of Fame. It was held at the stadium, and that was to accommodate the large throng of Buffalo Bill fans. And it became such a hit, that's now how they do the inductions. I remember going back to the Hall of Fame in the late 80s and early 90s when it was on Saturday, late morning, early afternoon, and took place on the steps actually of the hall. But because Jim brought 3,000 or 4,000 of his closest friends, they moved it to the stadium, and that's where they have it all the time now.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, we have reached the end of our show. Thank you, Russ. Thank you to Steph Stradley for joining us. And definitely our thoughts and prayers are with everyone in the Buffalo Bills community, the Wilson family and the Kelly family. And we'll be back with you in 2 weeks for another First and 60 show. Thank you.